A girl left the gym and went home just a few hundred yards away, but she never got there, triggering a massive police search over time. This case became one of the most notorious cases in modern Italy, leaving millions in shock. No one could have imagined that the unexpected developments of this story would rival any detective movie, or that something like this could happen in real life. Yara Gambaro was born on May 21, 1997, in a small Italian town called Bamotta. This quiet place, not far from Milan, has a population of just over 7,000 people and is known for its peaceful life, ancient architecture, and beautiful nature. Yara's family has lived there for generations. She has loving parents, an older sister, and 2 younger brothers. Yara loves her hometown. She studied at the local school, has a lot of friends, and is very active in gymnastics. Just a few hundred yards from her home is a gymnastics center. Big Sports, and Yara went there almost every week on the 26th of November. 2010, when she was 13, she was going to stop by the gym quickly to return her sound system to her coach. Around 5:15 p.m., she said goodbye to her parents and went out, saying she would be back in about an hour. Yara's parents weren't worried about letting her go out alone, even though she was old. Their town was very safe, and it only took a few minutes to walk to the gym. But that night, they started to worry because Yara was late at 7 p.m. She still hadn't returned. This was unusual. At 7:11 p.m., Yara's mother tried to call her, but the call went straight to voicemail. Her parents had a bad feeling. Worried, they immediately contacted the police. The case was quickly transferred to the police department of a large city nearby, many miles away. Letizia Ruggeri, a seasoned detective, was assigned to handle Yara's disappearance. As soon as she took over the case, she immediately sent officers to the town to expand the search area and mobilized the military police to assist. After speaking with Yara's parents, the police quickly went to the gym to check her last steps. The trainer confirmed that Yara had been there around 5:30 p.m. Her friends also confirmed that they saw Yara chatting with the trainer, watching a workout, and then leaving, heading home. However, a crucial detail emerged. At 6:44 p.m., Yara sent a text message to a friend, the last time anyone had heard from her. This led investigators to determine that she had disappeared between the sports center and her home. The police immediately split into several search parties. One group combed the streets, while another collected witness statements and extracted CCTV footage. Several people near the sports center that evening reported seeing a girl who looked similar to Yara talking to 2 men beside a red car. However, the police could not confirm whether it was Yara. They searched every corner of the sports center but found no trace of her. Meanwhile, the local police and the military expanded the search area, combing every street, field, and bank of the small river that ran through the town. Firefighters and dozens of volunteers joined the search. But no matter how hard they tried, Yara was nowhere to be found. In desperation, the police deployed a canine unit. The dogs quickly picked up Yara's scent on her belongings. But instead of leading the police from the sports center to her home as expected, they pointed in the opposite direction, toward a small town called Mello. Letizia Ruggeri then requested Yara's cell phone location data. The results shocked everyone. At 6:49 p.m., Yara's phone connected to a cell tower in Mello. This meant that just 5 minutes after she sent her last text message to her friend, she was at a location far from the sports center. The distance was too great for a girl to have covered on foot in such a short time. There could only be one explanation. Yara had been taken away by car. At this point, her trail had disappeared entirely. The police began to consider 2 main theories. The first, and most likely, was that Yara had been kidnapped. The second was that she might have run away. However, too many things didn't make sense in the second theory. Yara's last message showed she was still planning to meet her friend the next day, unlike someone who intended to run away. In just a few minutes, Yara's disappearance had become a horrifying mystery, plunging the whole of Italy into an unprecedented nightmare. Despite their suspicions, investigators questioned Yara's relatives and friends, but found no signs of trouble within the family. To widen the scope of the investigation, Letizia Ruggeri ordered the wiretaps of all members of Yara's family and dozens of others involved. She also took a bolder step. She requested the location data of every phone in Mello on the evening of Yara's disappearance. If this was indeed a kidnapping, the perpetrator's phone would have connected to telecommunications towers in the area. However, identifying him was still a challenging task. The police collected information on 15,000 phones present in the town that night. They began carefully screening each number, forming a special team to monitor thousands of suspicious phone numbers. Meanwhile, the search for Yara continued, but as the days passed without any results, Letizia realized that the investigation would not progress using traditional methods. Her last hope now lay in phone records, some of which inevitably belonged to the kidnapper. For days, the police listened to thousands of hours of recorded conversations, but found nothing related to Yara's disappearance. The case remained at a standstill until late November, when an officer overheard a haunting sentence. "Forgive me, God! I didn't kill her!" The words instantly woke the investigators up. They quickly identified the man who had uttered those suspicious words: Mohammed Fikri, a Moroccan construction worker living in the town where Yara's phone signal had last been detected. The police immediately tried to arrest Fikri, but there was a serious problem. Due to the vast amount of data, the recordings were processed several days later than they were. When they discovered Fikri's suspicious call, he had already boarded a ship leaving Italy, heading straight for Morocco. Realizing the highly suspicious situation, the Italian authorities immediately ordered the boat to be stopped. Fikri was arrested and taken back to Italy for questioning when the ship docked. Meanwhile, investigators continued to look for more evidence. They tracked Fikri down and found his car. When they checked the trunk, the police found a mattress covered in blood. The mattress was immediately sent to the lab for analysis. However, as soon as the results were released, the case took an unexpected turn. The blood on the mattress did not belong to Yara and was not even human. It didn't stop there. After reviewing the phone recording, linguists discovered that Fikri had said something completely different in his native language, and that the police had mistranslated the second part of the sentence. After further investigation, they concluded that Fikri had nothing to do with Yara's disappearance. In the end, the police were forced to release him. At this point, the Yara Gambirasio case had become one of Italy's most shocking stories. The national media covered it, making it the center of public opinion. But amid the news, one truth remained in the dark. Yara was still missing, and the person behind it all had yet to be revealed. Millions of people across Italy followed the search, hoping that Yara would be found alive. When news of Fikri's arrest hit the press, many believed that the police had finally caught the killer. But when his innocence was confirmed, the country was plunged into shock and utter despair. It meant the investigation had come to zero, no leads, clues, or leads to Yara. The police continued monitoring phone conversations, searching for evidence that might reveal the truth. Their efforts were relentless, but all led to dead ends. 3 months passed in a deadlock until February 26, 2011. That day, a man from a small town 6 miles from Yara's home went to a deserted field to fly his remote-controlled plane. But mid-flight, the plane malfunctioned, forcing him to make an emergency landing in a dense, tall, grassy area. As he went to pick up his equipment, he noticed a pile of rags on the ground. He paid it no attention at first, but as he looked closer, a detail made him shudder. A pair of boots protruding from beneath the pile of dirty cloth. Feeling uneasy, he immediately called the police. When officers arrived at the scene, they found a body under the rags. However, the level of decomposition made identification almost impossible. However, as soon as Letizia Ruggeri arrived, she knew it was Yara. She wore the same clothes as when she disappeared from the sports center 3 months earlier. Near the body, the police collected several personal items: house keys, an iPad, a SIM card, and a spare battery from a mobile phone. But her phone was nowhere to be found. Recognizing that this was a severe case, the police called in one of Italy's leading forensic experts to perform an autopsy. The results showed that the cause of death was multiple stab wounds. There were no signs of sexual assault. but the fact that some of Yara's clothes had been removed led investigators to hypothesize that the killer's motive might have been related to this. Forensic scientists also discovered strange fibers on the victim's body which were identified as materials commonly used in the production of a particular fabric. This opened up a new line of investigation. The killer might have worked in a textile factory or some related manufacturing facility in the area. In addition, they discovered two strange DNA samples, one on Yara's gloves, the other on her smartphone battery. However, the biggest problem was that these DNA samples were so small that it was tough to extract a complete profile. Furthermore, when compared with national DNA databases, there were no matches. Once again, the case was deadlocked. But then, 2 months later, Letizia Ruggeri received a surprising call. The experts at the laboratory reported that they had conducted a further investigation on the victim's belongings and found biological traces on her underwear. The analysis had produced a complete DNA profile, the DNA of an unknown man. Finally, after months of groping in the dark, the police had the most important clue, the killer's DNA. Without wasting time, Letizia immediately divided the police force into several teams, assigning them specific tasks. The hunt for the killer had officially begun. One police team was tasked with collecting DNA samples from all of Yara's relatives, acquaintances, and anyone who had been at the sports center on the day of her disappearance. Meanwhile, another team analyzed mobile phone location data, compiled a list of phone numbers that had traveled from Yara's town to Mello that fateful night, and then collected DNA samples from those involved. Due to the sheer scale of the operation, Letizia Ruggeri was forced to wait weeks for the results. Although 3 laboratories across Italy were mobilized to process the DNA samples, the process was slow. It could even take years. Over the following months, thousands of DNA samples were collected and analyzed, but none matched the DNA of the killer. Letizia kept thinking about other possibilities. And then a bold idea struck her. Not far from the field where Yara's body was found was a nightclub, and in her experience, killers tended to hide bodies in areas they were familiar with. The club was also frequented by people with criminal records and suspicious individuals. She decided to test this theory. If the killer had a connection to the club, then there was a chance his DNA could be found there. Letizia immediately put her plan into action. She assigned several police officers to stand outside the club every Friday and Saturday night to collect DNA samples from the guests who entered and left. Fortunately, all guests at the club were required to have a membership card, which made it easy for investigators to retrieve a list of people who had visited the venue in the past. Although she knew the chances of success were slim, Letizia did not want to leave any possibilities to chance. With no other leads, this was the only option they could try. And then came the unexpected breakthrough. One day, Letizia received a call from the DNA lab. Among the samples they had collected was a man named Damiano, whose DNA matched the profile of the killer. However, there was a significant problem. The match was only partial, and after further investigation, the police confirmed that Damiano could not be the killer. He was on another continent at the time of Yara's disappearance. But this was still a crucial turning point. Forensic experts hypothesized that since Damiano's DNA only partially matched the killer's, he was most likely related to Damiano. Letizia and her team immediately turned their attention to Damiano's family, determined to find the person most likely to be the real culprit. However, there was a significant obstacle. At the time, genetic genealogy was not widespread in criminal investigations. The method is new and incredibly complex, but for Letizia, it is the last hope of unraveling the mystery of Yara's death. The investigation quickly led to a startling discovery. Damiano's mother had been a housekeeper for Yara's family for 10 years before quitting a few years earlier. She was shocked to learn that someone in her family could be the killer. However, despite this vital clue, the search for a suspect dragged on for months without success. Letizia Ruggeri eventually concluded that none of Damiano's close associates were Yara's killers. That meant they would have to expand the investigation to hundreds, if not thousands, of his distant relatives. However, as the months passed without any progress, The media began criticizing Letizia and her team, accusing them of incompetence and negligence in handling the case. Some politicians even intervened, trying to pressure her to resign, but they were unsuccessful. Despite pressure from all sides, Letizia persisted in her investigation. She and her team dug through family trees and archives dating back to 1716, examining thousands of individuals, but time and again, they hit dead ends. Until in September 2011, a surprising breakthrough came. A family tree led them to a man named Giuseppe Guarinoni, a long-dead bus driver. His widow had kept several signed parcels from her husband, and experts extracted DNA from these postmarks. The results shocked everyone. Giuseppe was most likely the father or grandfather of the killer, the man whose DNA was found on Yara's underwear. Giuseppe had 2 sons, and the police immediately took their DNA samples to compare. But just when it seemed like the case was coming to an end, they were faced with another disappointment. None of Giuseppe's 2 children matched the DNA of the killer. This fact puzzled Letizia. The DNA clearly showed that the killer was a close relative of the family. But why did none of Giuseppe's legitimate sons match the collected samples? There was only one possibility. Giuseppe had an illegitimate child that his family did not know about. This was a new line of investigation, but finding such sensitive information was extremely difficult. The detectives interviewed thousands of people who had known or interacted with Giuseppe during his life. A year later, they finally had a promising lead. They discovered that since the 1960s, Giuseppe had been a regular visitor to a spa complex in a small town near Milan. Curiously, he spent 2 weeks there every year in May, never taking his family. This raised suspicions that he might have had an affair during that time. Letizia immediately requested the records of all the guests who had visited the spa during the years Giuseppe had been there. Surprisingly, the records were still available. Investigators began combing through the list, compiling the names of all the women who had been there at the same time as Giuseppe. The process took more than a year, but despite going through hundreds of names, Letizia was still unable to identify anyone who could be the killer's mother. Time passed, and the case remained at a standstill. But Letizia knew the key to finding the real killer was one step away. She just needed to find the mystery woman. Meanwhile, the media caught on to what the police were doing, and Giuseppe Guarinoni's illegitimate child theory quickly gained widespread attention across Italy. Eager to capitalize on the attention, journalists took it upon themselves to investigate. They began searching for children born from extramarital affairs in the area, and surprisingly, there were quite a few. In a tiny village, they even found 5 illegitimate children who might be linked to the case. This search continued until 2014, when investigators finally made a breakthrough. The Yara case had become a national sensation, with speculation and a relentless search for the identity of the mysterious woman who might have been Giuseppe's mistress. The police received countless tips, but most led to dead ends. However, that summer, a vital source emerged. Someone reported that Giuseppe may have had a relationship with Esther Arzuffi. When the investigators reviewed the records, they were surprised to discover that they had taken a DNA sample from Esther 2 years earlier, but had found no connection. Letizia nevertheless decided to have Esther's DNA reanalyzed, and this time the results were shocking. It turned out that during the initial testing, the forensic experts had made a grave mistake. Instead of comparing Esther's DNA to the killer's, they had compared it to Yara's. When the experts retested the sample with the correct sample, the truth was revealed. Esther was the killer's biological mother. With this shocking discovery in hand, Letizia continued to pursue the case. Esther had 3 children, including a pair of twins, a boy and a girl, who were all of the age range that would have made Giuseppe's illegitimate children. The twins were officially registered as the legitimate children of Esther's husband, but investigators began to suspect that Giuseppe was their biological father. Since the DNA collected at the scene belonged to a man, the police focused on Esther's son. He was 42 years old, a construction worker, and lived with his wife and children in Mapello, coincidentally, the same place where Yara's phone signal had been lost on the night she disappeared. Letizia knew that if she approached him directly, the suspect might become alarmed and destroy the evidence, so she devised an elaborate plan to collect his DNA without alerting him. The police discovered that the man took the same route to work daily, and Letizia had set up a breathalyzer along the route. Unsuspecting, the suspect stopped and blew into a breathalyzer. His breathalyzer was immediately sent to a laboratory for DNA analysis. Nearly 4 years after Yara's murder, Letizia finally got the results she had been waiting for. His DNA matched a biological sample taken from Yara's underwear. The killer's name was Massimo Bossetti, and on June 16th, Letizia prepared for an arrest that would go down in history. Meanwhile, the media caught on to what the police were doing, and Giuseppe Guarinoni's illegitimate child theory quickly gained widespread attention across Italy. Eager to capitalize on the attention, journalists took it upon themselves to investigate. They began searching for children born from extramarital affairs in the area, and surprisingly, there were quite a few. In a tiny village, they even found 5 illegitimate children who might be linked to the case. This search continued until 2014, when investigators finally made a breakthrough. The Yara case had become a national sensation, with speculation and a relentless search for the identity of the mysterious woman who might have been Giuseppe's mistress. The police received countless tips, but most led to dead ends. However, that summer, a vital source emerged. Someone reported that Giuseppe may have had a relationship with Esther Arzuffi. When the investigators reviewed the records, they were surprised to discover that they had taken a DNA sample from Esther 2 years earlier, but had found no connection. Letizia, nevertheless, decided to have Esther's DNA reanalyzed. And this time, the results were shocking. It turned out that during the initial testing, the forensic experts had made a grave mistake. Instead of comparing Esther's DNA to the killer's, they had compared it to Yara's. When the experts retested the sample with the correct sample, the truth was revealed. Esther was the killer's biological mother. With this shocking discovery in hand, Letizia continued to pursue the case. Esther had 3 children, including a pair of twins, a boy and a girl, who were all of the age range that would have made Giuseppe's illegitimate children. The twins were officially registered as the legitimate children of Esther's husband, but investigators began to suspect that Giuseppe was their biological father. Since the DNA collected at the scene belonged to a man, the police focused on Esther's son. He was 42 years old, a construction worker, and lived with his wife and children in Mapello. Coincidentally, the same place where Yara's phone signal had been lost on the night she disappeared. Letizia knew that if she approached him directly, the suspect might become alarmed and destroy the evidence, so she devised an elaborate plan to collect his DNA without alerting him. The police discovered that the man took the same route to work daily, and Letizia had set up a breathalyzer along the route. Unsuspecting, the suspect stopped and blew into a breathalyzer. His breathalyzer was immediately sent to a laboratory for DNA analysis. Nearly 4 years after Yara's murder, Letizia finally got the results she had been waiting for. His DNA matched a biological sample taken from Yara's underwear. The killer's name was Massimo Bossetti. And on June 16th, Letizia prepared for an arrest that would go down in history. The defense continued to make a controversial argument. They claimed that the killer could have come into contact with Bossetti's blood before the murder, and that it was this blood that got on Yara's underwear. They also questioned the DNA evidence, arguing that there could have been errors in the analysis. According to them, there are 2 types of DNA, one that varies significantly between family members and one that changes slowly over generations. The DNA found on Yara's underwear was of the latter type. That meant the defense's theory was that the DNA could have belonged to anyone distantly related to Bossetti, not necessarily him. However, the prosecution's forensic experts immediately dismissed this theory. They asserted that Bossetti's DNA matched the sample found at the scene, beyond a shadow of a doubt. But the defense wasn't done yet. In a shocking move, they unexpectedly dropped a new name. Another potential suspect, Sylvia, a fitness trainer. This revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom. It turned out that after Yara's body was discovered, forensic experts found Sylvia's blood on the sleeve of the victim's jacket. When this information was released, Sylvia's father testified that on the night Yara went missing, his daughter had returned home in a state of panic and cried all night. Investigators also discovered that Sylvia had sent several text messages to her brother that night, but both had quickly deleted them. So the content of these messages remained a mystery. In court, Sylvia claimed that she had no memory of her actions that night, could not explain why her blood appeared on Yara's clothes, nor could she remember what she had texted her brother. She refused to answer when pressed, only repeating one sentence: "I don't know." Although Sylvia's story raised suspicions, the evidence against Bossetti was too strong to ignore. In the summer of 2016, he was sentenced to life in prison. His lawyers tried to appeal but were unable to overturn the verdict. However, the case did not end there. The day after Bossetti was sentenced, his wife visited him in prison and revealed a shocking truth. None of their 3 children were his. She confessed to having had affairs with other men over the years. Not only that, investigators also discovered that the 3rd child of Esther Arzuffi, Bossetti's mother, was not the biological child of her legal husband or Giuseppe Guarinoni, but of a completely different man. Bossetti remains in prison to this day, but the story of Sylvia and her mysterious bloodstain haunts those who have followed the case. Some believe that the details are too suspicious to ignore. They question whether Bossetti was actually the killer, or whether he was wrongly accused due to the possibility of DNA evidence being manipulated. Regardless, the case is still considered one of the most shocking in modern Italian history. The country's top experts have thoroughly examined all the evidence, and the chances of Bossetti's innocence seem incredibly slim. What do you think of the case? Was justice served, or are there still mysteries to be solved? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like if you found this video interesting. Thanks for watching.